Kumlen and Ablad Gemara. It's the day after Simchas Torah. Today's daf is Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. In fact, we learned yesterday that Rabbi Akiva darshaned S, and that it teaches to include something. Es Hashem Elokecha Tira. So our Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva said it comes to include Talmidei Chachamim. When Yishalmi says it comes to include Torah. That Hashem Elokecha Tira. Not only should you fear Hashem, you should also fear His Torah. Not just to have Abbas HaTorah, but also to have Yiras HaTorah, to fear the Torah, and so on. So you have to work out what it means to fear the Torah. Not talking about fearing mitzvah, talking about fearing the Torah itself. You have to make sure that you keep all this manim. If you have a seder learning, a kvias, you should try to make sure you keep it and be there on time and so on. So we're continuing the mission. The mission is saying that if you are mekadosh a woman with something which is asa b'hana, she is not mekudesh to you. Why? Because you're giving her something of no value. And we went through a number of examples, and as we're going through it, the Gemara is trying to work out how do you know that this is forbidden to have any pleasure from? How do you know it's asa b'hana? So the Gemara continues. We are up to the design of the two dots, about 10 lines on the top of the page. The mission then says Egla Arufa, that calf that was put aside because you found a corpse. That we're up to about 10 lines on the top by the two dots. So an Egla Arufa which is Asa Bahano, has no value, and you're not allowed to give. So the question is, this Egla Arufa, the one that decapitated, that could be as a corpse, and you don't know who the murderer is, so the closest city has to take responsibility. And then you bring it to the Nachalesim, to the river, or to the hard earth, virgin soil, and then you decapitate it. It's asabano. Minon. How do you know that Egla Rufa is actually forbidden to have any hano? Amri v'Rabbi Kaparik sibegit kochim. It says the word kaper. Because we find the word kaper over here, la'amcha Yisrael, it says you should forgive the Jewish people, which is the same word used by kabbanis. So it's treated similar to kabbanis, which is that it's not only you can't eat it, you can't have any benefit as well. Obviously, you can't eat it because you're decapitated. You can't have any benefit whatsoever. The next thing is tzipayde mitzayra. We said there are two birds by a mitzayra. One is that you will shech. The other one is that you dip into the blood of the one that you shechted. You sprinkle it on the mitzayra, and then you send it away. So, Minala, how do you know that bird that you sent away is forbidden to have any hana from? How do you know that the birds are asa b'hana? How do you know the bird? Sorry, not the bird you sent away. The bird that you shechted. How do you know it's asa b'hana? So the Gemara says as follows: the Tana Rabbi Shmuel we might have different ways of learning. Here's one way. The Tana Rabbi Shmuel, the Yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel learned. Nemar, it says we find machshir. We find there's two kinds of kabbanas. One kabbalah is a machshir. It prepares you, it invites you back to Klal Yisrael, that not only now are you fully tahor, but you can also start eating from kachim. And then there's another category of kabbalah, which is a kapara. It's there to atone you for your sins. So Nema, we find machshir, we find a carbon machshir, which is that allows you to go back to Beis Hamikdash. For example, the asham, the guilt offering of Mitzvah, allows the Mitzvah to come back completely. It prepares him. And we also find a mechaper. All other kabbanas, all other kabbanas, not Mitzvah or asham, are there. You bring it inside Beis Hamikdash to atone. And Benema, we find also two kabbanas for the outside. We find a machshir on the outside, which is Egla Rufa, right? It's brought outside. You find also a mechaper that is outside. Ma machshir mechaper on b'fnim. Also, what's the just like the machshir. You have the what do you call it? The mechaper b'chutz is the egla we just learned, that's kaper, and the machshir b'chutz is the pigeons of a mitzvah, which you do outside to allow the tzara to come back in. So we say like this: Ma machshir mechaper mefnim. Just like the kabbanas, the two categories that we talk about are done inside the base of mikdash, the ashram for mitzvah and all other kabbanas. Also, by machshir mechaper have exactly the same laws. Af machshir mechaper on b'chutz, the same thing. All those kabbanas that you do outside, whether it's prepared like the birds for the mitzvah, or like the Egla Rufa, are the same. I'll say, but the same laws. And just like we just said, Egla Rufa, you can't have any benefit, so too, you can't have any benefit from the bird that you shechted for the mitzvah. Itma, we learned, we learned there's an argument, the birds of a mitzvah, when do they become prohibited? When do they say they become like kodesh, you cannot have benefit from it? Rabbi Yechon says, the moment you shechted it, that's when the one that you shechted becomes forbidden. And what about the other one? So Rashi seems to be learning, and others, that it never became masr. Since you're not shechting or anything else, it never became masr. Others learn that when you shechted the one pigeon, the other pigeon becomes mutter. No, they're both. As soon as he shechted, as soon as he shechted it, this one becomes usher, and the other one that you're going to send away becomes usher. When you send it away, and nobody, that's when it becomes mutter. The logic in that, it says in the other shayim, is because now you fulfilled its mitzvah. Like the Shilta says, now that you fulfilled its mitzvah, you're sending it away, it becomes permitted. The Shlakish says no, Meshas Lakicha. The moment you bought it, they're usher, so they're both usher. But when you shechted the one bird, that's when that shchit of the one bird does two things. The shechted one bird, you shechted the bird, but also it permits the other bird that you're going to shoo away. It's the moment you shechted it's a shchita that makes it forbidden. And the argument of the Rishonim whether the bird that you send away becomes forbidden as well, and then mutter or never became forbidden. But Ishlaki said Mishas Akicha. Ishlaki said it happened the moment you bought it. How do I know? Me'egla arufa nafka. I learned it out from egla arufa. What do you mean? No, but the Ishlaki is saying that the Easter does not begin with the moment you shecht it. Even while the bird is alive, it's already forbidden to you because you bought it for that purpose. And how do I know that? From egla arufa. Just like egla rufa, it becomes asa as soon as you designate and set it aside. Same thing here. My rufa mechaim, just like rufa is forbidden as soon as you have it. The bird of the mitzvah is the same thing, even while it's alive, as soon as you bought it. Says the Gemara, but the egla rufa doesn't become forbidden when you bought it. When does egla rufa become forbidden? It becomes forbidden when you start leading it towards the nachaleson, to where it's going to find where you're eventually going to decapitate it. So how do you know over here when you bought it? When does it happen over there? I heard it as a time. They cannot remember. My friends, I thought that the logic is you know when egla rufa comes after, and you lead it down to the nachaleson. So therefore so now we go back to the birds. So why do you say by the birds the moment you bought it? I could go back to the shlaki and say, one second. Egla rufa does not become forbidden the moment you bought it. It's only forbidden when the moment you bring it down to nachaleson. So how come when it comes to the birds of a mitzvah, you tell me as soon as you purchase it, after according to the shlaki, it shouldn't be forbidden. So the Gemara, how can you compare it? There are a few stages. First, you buy it, but then there's another stage prior to the eventual decapitation, as you're leading it down to the Nachal Esan, which is either the river or the hard ground. Is Hach over here also? East Lake Borchin, here there's only two steps, either when you buy it or when you shecht it. So while it's alive, the only thing that you do is you purchase it. So we have no choice but to say that it becomes usher the moment you purchase it. So Rabbi Yechon is going to ask a number of questions to Reish Lakish. First question. Rabbi Yechon said, I believe it's the moment you shecht it that the bird becomes usher. You say the moment you bought it. So let me ask you a question. It says in Pasuk, the Brayso says as follows: on this Pasuk, Kol Tzipor Tahira Techela, every the kosher pigeon, which is pure and uncontaminated, you can eat. What's it come to teach you? Kol, every L'Rabbis Esam Shalachas, to tell you that the bird that was sent away, you're permitted to eat it. Then it says in the Pasuk, V'zeh Asher Lo Techel, so the following you shouldn't eat. L'Rabbis Esam Shchuta, to tell you that even though it was shechted properly, you cannot eat it. Now, according to me, it makes sense. The pigeon does not become usher, the bird of the mitzvah. The bird of the mitzvah does not become usher until you actually shecht it. That's what the pasuk is telling you. Even though you shecht it, it becomes usher. But you hold that as soon as you purchase that bird, it became usher already. So why don't you the pasuk tell me that after you shecht it, it remains usher? Of course it's usher. It was usher even before you shechted it. We talk about the mechaim, so you can tell me that as soon as even while it's alive, it's usher. Tell me after you shechted it that it's usher. He goes, no. Nothing. It makes perfect sense. You know why? Because a lot of animals are forbidden while they're alive, but only when you shecht it becomes mutter. We would have thought the same thing here. Ma'atem immediately have a kachim, general kachim. The mechaim must say all kachim when he's consecrated, it becomes usher. It only becomes permitted for the people, the kohanim, is only after it's shechted. I would have thought the same thing applies by the mitzvah. The shchita comes and makes it kosher. That's why we need a pasuk to tell you that no, even after shchita, the bird of the mitzvah is forbidden. Says the Gemara, okay, I have another question for you. It says, Shachta, what happened? He shechted that bird for the mitzvah, and when treifa, you found out, it turned out to be that it was treif. That means that the mitzvah cannot rely on this bird. So what do? Because you brought a set of two. One you're going to send away, and one that you're going to shecht. So now that they found that the one that you shechted is no good. So what do you do? Do you bring a new set of two, or you just bring another one to shecht in its place? Is yikar zug lishniya? All you have to do is bring another bird to take the place, a substitute for the one that found treif, and you use the original bird that you can send away. But and the first one is permitted with hana. And we're talking about that your shchita made a treif. That's how we understand it right now. You made it somehow or another. You didn't shecht it properly, and you made a treif. Now, so he says here you don't have to make a whole new set of two. One, just a substitute is good enough. If you're going to tell me Mechayim Masura, if you're going to tell me what that while it's alive, it was already Aser. Harishayna Mayim Muteres Hanom. If you're so in other words, what happened here? The shchita ruined it. If the shchita ruined it, then if you say as soon as you bought the bird, you just like you say, as soon as you bought the birds, they both awesome. You need shchita to permit the first bird, but since the second bird that you shechted, never the shchita actually ruined the bird. If the shchita ruined the bird, that means you never shechted. So if you never shechted, that they have a problem. When you bought the two birds, it was a kosher bird, and therefore the other bird became asa bahana. Both are also now. You need to shech the second bird to make the first one permitted. But how can you now? And you ruined it by shechting it. So bring another bird. How does that help the first bird that you're going to send away? That second bird was not around when you bought them in the beginning. So therefore, that first bird that you're going to send away, how does it become mutter by shechting the second bird? This isn't the second bird that came with it. It's not a twin. You have to buy a new set. Says the Gemara, we're talking about that, not that you ruined it now by shechting it. You found something, you discovered that was treif all along. It was never kosher in the first place. You found that there was something wrong with the intestine. That means it was there from before. That already when you bought it, it was never suitable, and therefore it never became usher. So therefore the whole thing never became usher in the first place. It was never Kiddush in the first place because you only had one bird. Say, come along, that's the third question. It says you have to, when you shecht these birds, you also bring a hyssop with them and a cedar tree and and a red thread. So what happened? Shachta, you shechted the bird, but shaloi be'ezel, you didn't do it right. You didn't have these other props with you. You didn't have the ezel, the hyssop, be'ezel, not the cedar tree, shaloi be'ezel, the red, the strings. So what happens then? Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yaakov says that the fact of the matter is you set it aside and you shechted it, it's awesome. And if it became us, you're missing some of the props, so you're missing. Even though you didn't shecht it properly, it's still a shchita, and therefore it becomes aser. That bird that you shecht for the mitzvah. Shimon says, nothing happened here. Since you shechted it incorrectly, it's as if you never shechted it, and therefore it remains mutter. The only argument is limited to since you shechted it not really correctly. Do we reckon with that shchit or not? One of them says it's still considered shchit. She said nothing happened there, and they don't become upset. But everyone holds Everyone holds that when the whole question here is this called shchit or not? In other words, prior to the shchit it was permitted. What makes it forbidden? The shchit, and the question is, do we recognize the shchit or not? It's not a question on the Shlakish. The Shlakish says, when does it become shchita? Only when does it become forbidden? Only as soon as you bought it. And here they're only arguing regarding the stage of shchita, but prior to that, obviously, it's permitted. Says the Shlakish, I acknowledge that, but that's only these two Tanaim. But there's other Tanaim disagree. And that's the one we brought on top of the page. It says machshir mechaper b'fnim. It says machshir mechaper b'fnim, as we said before, by the ashram of a mitzvah, which you bring inside, which prepares the mitzvah, and then all other kabbanas mechaper, and there's no distinction between the two. But then machshir mechaper b'chutz, then you have these kabbanas from the outside, the bird that's from the outside, and the egla roof. Also, by they have the same status. So too, the bird for a mitzvah is very similar to the egla rufa. Also, the same thing like the egla rufa. What do we say about egla rufa? That it becomes forbidden while it's still alive. So the birds also become forbidden while it's alive. And Rishpal argues with these other two Tanaim and Yaakov. Gufa, let's analyze it. The pasuk says, every bird you can eat, means you can eat the bird that you sent away. The following you shouldn't eat from them. The other bird that you shechted, you cannot eat. How do you know which one is which? Maybe the other way around. Maybe the one that you shechted, you did something to it, should be permitted. The one that you didn't shecht, it should be forbidden. How do we know which bird the Torah is referring to? That's permitted. Is one permitted, one forbidden? I know which is which. Rabbi Yechon said in the name of Shem Yochai, even though Rabbi Yechon never learned from Shem Yochai, that's what it says, Mishum. In other words, he's like third or fourth person. We don't find that living animals are forbidden, and therefore the bird that remains alive is not forbidden. Says he want to know. We don't find living animals forbidden. What about Vahari Muktzah? An animal that was set aside, let's say, to be used for a sacrifice of Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to use the animal in the base of English. It's very forbidden while it's alive. It says in the pasuk that you should run the beginning. It says Vayikra min habehema to tell you that not all animals can be brought up as a carbon. If an animal is involved in bestiality, you cannot bring it up as a carbon. And then we say also min habaka from the cattle, not all the cattle. For example, an animal was used for avodah zarah, an animal set aside is forbidden. Whenever the balachayim they're alive, it's also. Says the Gemara, Ki Asidi Ligavoya, those are forbidden to be used on the Mizbeach. But an ordinary person can use it. He's masculine. That's a question. What about Roiveya Venirba? Let's say bestiality, an animal that has bestiality with a woman or with a man. The witnesses that actually saw that that bestiality was involved. I mean, the animal has to be killed. Is that these animals are alive? I see it's usher. What are you telling me that we never find an animal that's alive and it's usher to ordinary people, and therefore the bird you said that we send away from the Matzorah is permitted. But here, this animal is usher to eat even by an ordinary person. If there were witnesses there, you have to put the animal down. Even if you shacht it, you cannot eat it. So that's not a good answer, because we do find animals that are while alive are still forbidden. You're right, there are a couple exceptions, but generally speaking, animals that are alive are not also to ordinary people. They can eat it. So therefore, the bird that's alive is probably the one that's permitted. The bird that you shechted for the mitzvah is the one that's forbidden. However, there's another answer. It says in Pasuk that you should sprinkle, on the person who is at Mitzvah 7 times, and then what you do is the shilach, and you send the bird out al pnei hasad. You send the bird out onto the field. What do you mean al pnei hasad? I mean onto the field. What's he trying to teach you here? Just say send it away. Why delineate where you send it away? Ma sadim muteris, to tell you it's like a field. Just like a field is permitted, this bird that you send away, the living one is the one that's permitted. Now, automatically, the one that's going to be shechted is not permitted. Says the Gemara, but don't we use this pasuk hasada to teach you another law altogether? Where actually the Torah is telling you specifically where to send the bird out to. Is that what the word sad is coming to tell you, that it's permitted like a field? I would buy that we need to look at the time. We need for the following. That is Sodom. It says that you should send out the field. Don't stand there in Jaffa that has a wall facing the sea. These are Kenayamans and send the bird away towards the sea. Or big Gavas in a place called Gavas where it has a wall facing the wilderness. Use a candle in Midbar and send it out to the Midbar. Don't stand outside the city. Just send the bird away. In other words, you can't just send whatever you want. You're standing in the city, and you're sending it away outside of the wall of the city. We're sending it to the fields. Now, so therefore, we need the hasad to tell you exactly where to send it, to the fields. So how do you learn from the word hasad that the bird is permitted like a field? So we can learn 2 things. The other one says, let it just say sada, field. My hasada, the field. That article, the, shma. We learn 2 dinim from here. So someone if we're going to take sada and say that sada means literally you have to send the bird directly to a field. So what about other psukim that there's for example, klayim, where it says also sada? Maybe klayim should only forbidden if it's in a field, but if it grows not in a field, but in a potted plant or somewhere else, maybe it should be permitted. Why is it so? Rava says Rava says logic. If the Torah if you're going to tell me the bird that he sends away is the one that's forbidden, the bird is shechted permitted, that bird that's been sent away will fly somewhere. Somebody else doesn't know that it was used from a Torah and will shecht and eat it, and without realizing it, they commit an aveda. The Eibush is not going to make dinim that enables people to do avedas. That's not how the Torah works. Similar logic then is what Chassidus normally says. It's very difficult to understand that shofar, Rosh Hashanah, lulav on the first day Sukkot, if it falls on Shabbos, we don't bench lulav, we don't blow shofar, because people might carry and we commit a sin. How can the Torah give us a mitzvah that can cause people to do an aveda? The mitzvah itself is causing someone to do an aveda. How can that be? And Chacham came along, had to eliminate the mitzvah of the Torah for that reason. Similar logic to what Rava said. The Torah wouldn't put challenges in our place, give us mitzvahs that could cause us an avera. So Chassidus therefore explains the reason why we don't blow shofar on the first day Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, or we don't bench lulav on the first day of Sukkot on Shabbos, is because we don't have to. Whatever we're trying to achieve with the shofar or with the lulav, Shabbos itself is such a high level of kedusha that it accomplishes on its own. And then we put it in play. We use those reasons in Nigla, but that's the main reason, because the Torah wouldn't cause us to stumble. Anyway, then the sign knows the here and knows. How do you know that? It says in the pasuk, Kodesh Yeh Gadol Pera. It says that Kodesh Yeh Gadol Pera Saroshay, Gadol Pera Saroshay. So we can dash in the word Kodesh. It doesn't have a vav, as if to say it's like a Kodesh, like a carbon, not just holy. Kodesh is holy. Holy is nothing. A person is holy. Kodesh means it's like a carbon. So the hair is like a carbon that's forbidden to have any benefit whatsoever. Gidula Yeh Kodesh. Now, why should be like Kodesh? It should be like a carbon. If you're going to compare it to carbon by carbon, if you can redeem it, you take the kedusha away from the animal and exchange it for the money. The same applies to the hair of another as well. The said, "Meet Karinan, Kadosh, Kadosh Karin." At the end of the day, even though we there's no vav there, so we read as if it's a carbon, as if it's a Kadosh. But the fact is, we read it Kadosh, and because we read it Kadosh, it's not really a carbon. So not in every respect it's similar to a carbon, and that's why we say that it becomes also, but in that respect, it becomes like carbon is forbidden to have any anah, but you cannot transfer it for money. The Petach Hamar, the firstborn of a donkey, is also b'hana. Name if you don't exchange it for a sheep, whatever. Name let us say Maslis is like Reb Shimon. Mishnah is not Reb Shimon. The Tanya Petach Hamar also b'hana. Rabbi that a Petach Hamar is forbidden to have any pleasure. Reb Shimon says mati. Reb Shimon says you could have pleasure from a Petach Hamar. You're not allowed to eat it. Well, it's tripe anyway, but you can have pleasure from the firstborn donkey. Rav says no. Our Mishnah is not talking about a case while the animals. That argument is talking about while the egla rufus is alive before you decapitate it. Can you have any hana from the animal? But everyone agrees that once you decapitate it, you can't have any benefit. Once you did its full mitzvah, you can't have any benefit. And they found that's what I'm just talking about here. After decapitated, you decided to give that to a woman. Basa b'chala, you don't have any benefit from basa b'chala, meat and milk. Where's the Torah say that? You shouldn't cook the milk of a goat with a mother. Gimel pamim, 3 times the Torah says it. Why? Echad is achila, once you tell you're not allowed to eat it. Echad is another one tell you not have any benefit. But echad is a bishul, one tell you're not allowed to even cook. So it must be that but not everyone agrees to that, even though that's the halacha. Masnisin the loike haitana. Our mission does not follow the following view. The Tanya Belun Reb Shimon Yehuda. Reb Shimon Yehuda says that basa b'chol of asa b'achila. He said that basa b'chol you're not allowed to eat, but mutar b'ano. He said you could have benefits. Remember it says ki am kodesh ato Hashem alekacha. You are a holy nation to Hashem. And then it says, so we're comparing the cooking to Am Kaddish. Where else do you find the expression Kaddish? Well, it says in the pasuk regarding treif, that you are people who are holy to me, and therefore you shouldn't eat meat in the field. That's treif, and you should give it to your dog instead. Malahalan, when it comes to treif, it's limited to asa b'achila mutar b'hana. You could benefit from treif, but you just can't eat. Same thing, the same thing. So therefore, our Mishnah follows the view of Rabbi Shmuel and not the view of Shimon Yehuda. The next thing is chulin shenishchatu ba'azara. If you took an animal, that's chulin, and you brought it into the Beis Hamikdash and you shechted it there, that is forbidden according to our Mishnah to eat. Forbidden to have any pleasure from it, and if you gave it to a woman, you are not mekudesh. Says the Gemara, because you didn't give her anything. How do you know that? Rabbi Yechon said, I made the following. The Torah says, the Torah says, I want you shchait shali b'shali. I want you to shech my kabbanas, things that belong to me, in my area, with my building, which is the Beis Hamikdash. U'shalcha b'shalcha. And for example, you want to consume meat, chulin, I want you to shech it in your place, away from the Beis Hamikdash. So if you take a carbon and you shecht it wherever you are, it is forbidden not only to eat but to have anah, because who permitted, if you took an animal you set aside for a carbon slumber, whatever it is, and you shecht it in your backyard, not only you can't eat it, you can't even have benefit from it. Why? Because you're not sprinkling the blood. So so do you take one of your animals, which is chulin, and you bring it into my sanctuary, and you put it on the mezbech, it remains also not only to eat but also to have anah. You're going to argue, how can I say that? But there is a distinction between the two. If you take a carbon, an animal that was set aside for a carbon, and you shecht it outside, the din is you chayiv kares. So maybe if you take one of your animals and you shecht it in the base of meat, it should be chayiv kares as well. If you're going to compare the two, compare it. If you take an animal chulin and you bring it as medrash, you get kares. On Makra, it says in pasuk, when do you get kares? Only the el pesach oil moed, an animal which is a carbon, and you stood there by the pesach oil moed, and you stood there right opposite the base of medrash, and you didn't bother bringing it inside. Lahakriv carbon lahashem. You didn't bring it inside to bring it as a carbon, and v'nichris, and you get cut. You get cut down. So we say al carbon. When do you get cut down on the animal that should have been a carbon? You brought outside. You got carbon on this cutters. But al chulin shchinish razor. If you took chulin and you brought it into the base of migdash, which you shouldn't have done because we're comparing it to what you did outside. But cutters you won't get. Ain't on this cutters. You didn't have beta, but you won't get cutters because it says clearly the pasuk. Only when you get cutters if you took a carbon, you brought it outside. But now if you took chulin, you brought it inside. It's just an Easter in the Torah. And you cannot benefit. So the can't. But I don't understand. So at the end of the day, they're not exactly the same. So why can't I argue? You know why a carbon you cannot have any benefit if you shecht it in your backyard because you get chorus if you did it outside opposite the base of Mikdash. So strict. On the other hand, if you take chul, you bring it down zara where there's no chorus. Maybe also if there's no chorus, there's no isabana as well. Equal me, we can ask, on your cutters. So how can you compare the two? How you know it's asabana? Abai says Mahach. Abai says, I'll tell you where we learned it from. It says 3 times the word v'shchata. It says 3 times shechting by kabbanas. It says one part v'shchata, you should shecht it by the right in front of the oil moed, and it says you place your hand on the animal v'shachat oisa, and you should shecht it. And then it says another place you should lean on the animal and you should shecht it. Plus a kroyi, you say these are all extra. Obviously, that's what you do with the animal. You bring the base of English. You shecht it. Why do you have to say 3 different times? And they're all next to each other by shlamim, and then it says shchatoi was shachat twice extra. Why do you have to say 3 times? That it seems to me you should only shecht it in the azara. Because it says the following. It says, we're going to have an argument if we eaten while they were in the desert, they were permitted to eat general meat for meat consumption. According to Bishmal, while they were in the desert, any animal that was fit to be brought in the Mizbech had to be brought in the Mizbech because you're not too far from the base of English. It's only once you come back to Israel and people live far away, I'll allow you to eat chulin and shecht it wherever you want. So it says in the pasuk, when you come back to Israel, and it'll be far away from the base of Mikdash, and you can shecht. We have to make makom karev. I want you to shecht outside the base of Mikdash, so it's a lav that you derive from a mitzvah asay. So the mitzvah to shecht, but outside the base of Mikdash, not in or the Mishkan. That's once you arrived in Eretz Yisrael. Prat ulechulin. So we learn from here, dafke shechted outside of the Mishkan. So but don't shecht it inside. So therefore, we know clearly from here, any animal which is suitable for the mizbech, you have a lav that comes from the say that you're not allowed to shech. Mainly, to me, before I don't know if it's an animal that could go on the mizbech because it's unblemished. Or you look at it, that can go on the mizbech. How do I know that if it is blemished? In other words, it's not suitable for the mizbech. How do I know you're not allowed to bring it into the mizbech? You know why I include them? Because you can't mean hamachshin, even though it has a blemish, but it's the same kind of animal. It's a sheep, a goat, a cow. Because it's the same animal, it's only because of blemish, therefore it's included in that avera. You cannot bring chulin into the azara, into the courtyard. How do I know to include even chayas, which a chaya is something, a deer, a kosher animal, you can never bring it on the mizbech. How do I know they're also included? You cannot, if you bring it in, you commit an aveda. I'm including the chaya, because at the end of the day, the only way you can eat it is through shchita. So it's similar to a behemoth, so it comes included in that aveda as well. How do I know to include birds as well? Because birds you're not allowed to bring onto the mizbech. How do I know that it's included as well? And not only that, there's no at least an chaya tzvi. You have a pasuk that talks about shchita. So it's similar to the way to eat it is similar to the animal you bring on the mizbech. But a bird, there's nowhere in the Torah mention the word shchita. And even those you bring on the mizbech is malika. There's no shchita there. So how do I know that if you bring that into the base of Mikdash and you shech it, you commit an aveda? So he says here. Three times, and we know what? Forget what we said till now, even though those are good reasons, but we'll use the three psukim. But ours you shouldn't shech, but it should be permitted. So because it says three times, we're going to use the three psukim for all three of them. One of them is for a chaya, one of them is for a bird, and one of them is that you're not allowed to even eat it if you shecht it. Even if you're not allowed to eat it. I learned chaya because of logic, true, but there's a pasuk as well. All we said was if there's no pasuk, I would know from logic. But the bottom line is if you shecht it, the Torah tells you that you cannot eat it. I would have thought you could, because Abaya in Gemara Tamura says, "Kol milsa the amar achmana le'sabit," things Hashem said don't do. But if you do it, it's effective. So I would have thought, okay, now I'll bring an animal into the base of Mikdash if it's not a carbon. But if you did it, it should be all right. So the Torah says no. That you should know that you're not allowed to eat this. That's what. How do I know that? Because it says, when can you eat it? Only it away from the base of Mikdash. You can only eat it if it's away. But you cannot eat in a close place. So coming to exclude, if you take an animal and you bring it azara, you cannot eat it. So here you learn out that chulin that was geschocht in the azara, you're not allowed to eat. Okay, so we can go back again to the whole cycle again. So the only animals that could have been brought to the base of Mikdash, you're not allowed to eat. So first we learned that you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to shecht. Then we're trying to learn now, okay, if you did shecht it, how you know you're not allowed to eat it? So we're saying, it says there, an animal that you could have brought in the base of Mikdash, but you brought it outside, then you should not, if it's not a carbon, don't bring it in the base of Mikdash, and if you do, you cannot eat it. Only can eat it. So now we're going to go through all the same thing again, that we're going to learn out that anything else which is similar, you can, if you bring it into the base of Mikdash and it's not really a carbon, you should not be able to eat it. So how do you so Gemara says, animals that can be brought in the mizbeach. How do I know to include a Baal Mumim? An animal with a blemish that you cannot put him as beich. So the same thing. It's the same kind of animal. It doesn't matter blemish or not. You cannot eat it if you shecht it inside. Because it's the same method of eating, enabling you to eat. Okay, therefore, if you bring it into the base of Mikdash, you cannot, if you shecht it, you cannot eat it. Even I know birds as well. It's the same thing. The three psukim teaches you even a bird where there's no shchita in the Torah also. Okay, now go to the next step. All I know is you cannot eat it. But how do I know you cannot have any benefit? Because we're trying to explain our mission. Our mission says if you gave a woman a chulin that you shechted in the base of Mikdash, she's not mekudesh because it's forbidden to have any pleasure from it. So you're not giving her anything of value. How do I know that? So we're going to go through the same thing again. You shouldn't check. But if you did check, they give it to the dog. It says in the pasuk there that you should throw to the dog. It's talking about here that if you shecht a mother and there's a baby calf, let's say in the womb, it's called a ben pekua, and you don't have to shecht that baby because automatically that baby becomes permitted as well. The shechit of the mother also carries over to the shechita of that baby. What happens if that baby calf stuck its hand out while you shechted it, so it was not included inside the animal? So it left the mechitza, the confines of the animal. That hand is forbidden to be eaten. So we're saying like kelev shouldn't oisei. Only that if it's not inside its mechitza, its domain. Even though you cannot eat it, you can have pleasure. But if you have something else, that the problem is it went the wrong side of the domain. For example, you took an animal that should have been yeshacht in your backyard, but you brought it into the past of the mechitza of the confines of the base of the mishkan of the base of Mikdash, you brought it inside to the mizbech. That not only is it forbidden to eat, you cannot even have benefit. You cannot throw it to your dog. Only that you can throw your dog. You cannot throw chulin nazara. That's how you know that it's forbidden to have any benefit. Says the Gemara, Mar Yehuda once met Rabbi Yisrael. We'll just finish the Gemara here. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Bechon, Rabbi Shmuel, the sons of Rabbi Bechon, they were standing in the doorway of the house of Rabbi. they said, look, we learned in the Brisa, Tanya, we learned the following. We learned in the Brisa that argues that Mishnah. If a man gave a woman a petach the firstborn of a donkey, or the basal chalav, meat and milk, or chulin chazar, Rab Shimon says mekudeshes. Could be raised before. Petach hamad, he says, is permitted to have benefit. Basar b'chalav, we already had opinion that says that basar b'chalav is you're permitted to have benefit. Rab Shimon as well, and chulin that you brought into the Mizbeis Hamikdash, Rab Shimon holds you're allowed to have benefit from. And the Chachamim says, Eina Mekadeshes, because you don't have any benefit from any of these three. Alma, we see close from here, that Chulin, Shenishchut, Bazara, that Rab Shimon Lavdar, says, not Mahatorah, you can have benefit. Now, there's two ways of understanding when you say Chulin in the Azara is not Mahatorah. Either you learn it's not Mahatorah at all, or but it's still asam d'rabbanan, or it's totally permitted. Well, if you learn it's totally permitted, it makes sense. According to Rab Shimon, you can give it to a woman. But if it's still asam d'rabbanan, something which is asam d'rabbanan, how can you give to a woman and be mekadosh? We learned in Gemara Pesachim, we already mentioned yesterday, that if you mekadosh a woman with chametz, an hour before the Torah says it's forbidden, but the rabbanan says it's forbidden, she's not mekadosh at all. So if it's asar hanam d'rabbanan, you still didn't give her anything of value. So one answer is that chametz is connected to an Easter of the Torah. Wait one more hour, it's Asuma Torah, so it's much more stringent, and that's why you cannot give it to her as Kiddushin. Here, if Chulin is, there's no Avera Mahatayra to bring Chulin to the base of Mikdash, only with Rabbanon, then there's no drama whatsoever, then there's no problem at all, because it's recognized as Kiddushin. And others say, no, you're right, he gave her nothing of value, but she maybe received something of value. It's not us. Okay, we'll talk about it soon. Second, Ramino asks a question. Rab Shimon says, so we have one answer we just said, in addition to the answer we gave yesterday. But Ramino asks a question. Rab Shimon says, Chulin Mazara used to for. Rab Shimon says, Chulin that was found in the Azara you should burn. In other words, we have sometimes things which are forbidden to have any benefit or anything else, we tell you to bury it. And sometimes we tell you to actually burn it. Like Kabbalah, we say you have to burn it. Chametz and Pesach would say, we pass you have to burn it, like Rabbi Yehuda says. Now, if it's something that's only Asher Rabbanan, so something we're strict, we say just bury it. If it's something that's Asher Menatayda, sometimes we're not happy just burying it, then we would much more machmir, we say you have to burn it. Why do you have to burn it? Because even though we make gzeris, and the reason we tell you to bury it, because otherwise people see you bringing a carbon. If let's say it's Asher Rabbanan, people see you taking this animal and what do you call it? And burying it. What do you call it? It would be, let's say, if people would see you take this animal and you're burying it, they don't know what happened. They think it's a carbon that lets you did something wrong with it, and you're burying it. They'll think all kabbanos you buried. So we're very worried. So we tell you know what, you have to go ahead and burn it. But if you're going to tell me, let's say a chaya, nobody's going to mistake a chaya that maybe there's a carbon that went wrong and you're only burying it, because everyone knows a chaya cannot be a carbon. So why in the world are we machmer and we say that you have to burn it? That in itself, that we are machmer, you have to burn it, must be because mahatayda. It's also the same Rab Shimon holds that mahatayda, you're not allowed to bring the animal into the base of Mikdash. So why he says on the bottom, and the same thing a chaya, the shechta azara. Why do you have to burn it? That's what Rab Shimon says. But if it's only awesome rabbanon, why do you have to be so worried? That you're going to be so machmer to burn it. Ishtiku, they were quiet. They didn't know how to answer. How do we reconcile Rab Shimon? It's rabbanon, and why burn it? Also, the comment that Abba came for Abba Amalu, he made the following expression. He said, "Palga ukemincha." Those people like to argue, and they ask you the question. You know what we're talking about here? We talk about here. Yeshechtet v'nimtzas treifa. Rab Shimon that says here that if you gave a woman a chulin that yeshechtet nazara, she's mekudesh. He holds that maybe chulin is also mahatayla. But the reason why he holds if he gave it to a woman is because we're talking about a case here where you took the chulin, brought it to the base of English, you shechted it, but it turned out to be that it was treif. And Rab Shimon holds that if you shechted it, Rab Shimon is consistent with his view, and he says that if you shechted it improperly, then it's not called shechting. So it's as if you never shechted the animal inside the base of English. And therefore, all the penalty is not considered chulin that shechted nazara that it's asa, because it's not a shecht. You never shechted it, and therefore you never shechted it. It's never became asa, and that's why he gave it to a woman. But Reb Shimon says that hasheicha treifa, if you shecht a treifa animal, And the chena sheichid nitzasef, or you shech an animal you didn't know was treif at the time, only later on. Zev v'zeh chulin bazar. So the first Tana holds, well, you still committed a sin. You shechted chulin bazar because you made a shchita. But Rav Shimon says it's mutter. Why is it mutter? Because it's not recognized as a shchita. Mate b'hana v'chacham reishon. Rav Shimon says it's mutter b'hana, and the Chachamim is asis. So Rav Shimon holds that Chulin Bazar is forbidden, but he says that you gave it to a woman. Why it's mutter is because you didn't shecht it properly, became trade for something else. Okay, continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, 7 o'clock.
Okay.